Walking through Brownwood today, it's easy to forget that it even used to be a neighborhood. The last house here was torn down over 30 years ago, and the streets that once carried traffic slowly submit to the encroaching wild. It may be hard to imagine now, but this was once one of the most desirable neighborhoods in the city. When Brownwood was developed, starting in the 1930s, the land here was dry and rose high above the surrounding water. The lush, expansive lots were marketed to executives at Baytown's large refinery, and its waterfront location made it an attractive place for families to buy. By the end of the 1950s, there were more than 400 homes here. Unlike most of Baytown, Brownwood lead an upper middle class. It was, by accounts of the residents, an idyllic place to grow up. Kids spent their summers exploring the banks of the bay and bicycling down the meandering streets of the subdivision. It would ironically be the refineries that would eventually lead Brownwood to its demise. Through much of the 20th century, a climate of loose regulation and environmental ignorance led the industries and municipalities in southeast Texas to pump groundwater without restraint. Much of the Gulf Coast, not just Brownwood, sank, in some places by as much as 15 feet. The peninsula that had once separated Brownwood from the channel became an island, perhaps the first sign of the way things were headed. After Hurricane Carla in 1961, it became clear that something was wrong. New construction was halted as doubts about the subdivision arose. The area had grown increasingly flood-prone over the previous few decades. Residents, who were used to staying through hurricanes, found themselves trapped in their homes. Over time, docks and bulkheads had to be raised as they sank slowly into the water. Even trees began to die as the brackish water of the bay poisoned their root systems. Determined, the residents of Brownwood brought in fill and even constructed pumps and levees in an effort to protect their once dry neighborhood. The neighborhood's grandeur was in peril, but many residents stayed. As time went on, however, the land would continue to subside. It no longer took a tropical storm to flood the subdivision. Now, even in clear weather tides, water could inundate the low-lying homes, and the future of Brownwood was in serious question. Hurricane Alicia in 1983 was Brownwood's death knell. Groundwater pumping had been stopped by this point, but for Brownwood it was too late. After evacuating for the storm, many of the residents weren't allowed to occupy their homes, and in the years after, Brownwood became a haven of looting and dumping. Only a handful of people remained in the subdivision to keep an eye on the abandoned homes and streets. Expansive custom homes sat empty and left to rot. Baytown's most desirable subdivision had become a wasteland. Faced with a public nuisance and safety risk, the city began buying out the landowners. What remained of the homes were torn down, and even the most stubborn owners who had stayed through all the storms were eventually forced to sell. 10 years later, the city opened a nature center here that remains to this day. Not much is left of old Brownwood. Many of the streets have completely overgrown or sank below the water. Even the docks and bulkheads that once lined the shore are barely visible today. Occasionally, you find a solid reminder of the neighborhood's old life. There are still manhole covers, the sewers below long filled. The ditches that once drained water to the bay now lie perpetually full of brackish water. A few slabs remain. You can see where walls once stood, and even tile from a shower, whose vibrant color long outlasted the home that once contained it. You can imagine the life that once occupied the knolls and shores of Brownwood, but today, it lies as a reminder of just how wrong a place can go.